Good morning, everyone. We'll give a few minutes for folks to join. My name's Elisa Darling. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Digital. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the first webinar in Digital's new Defense Market Access series, aptly titled Getting in the Door. To start, I want to just acknowledge that I'm based in Vancouver, BC, and I'm on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. But as a pan-Canadian organization, Digital operates on the ancestral and unceded territory of many Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples who share and steward our lands. Digital is Canada's global innovation cluster for digital technologies. We bring together industry, post-secondary institutions, and the public sector to solve major challenges with advanced technology through collaboration and co-investment. Our focus is helping Canadian innovation move beyond great ideas and into real adoption at scale. Specifically in the dual use and defense sector, we're working with our national network of industry partners and academia to accelerate the adoption and commercialization of dual use innovations. Examples include industrial automation and autonomous systems, and quantum resilient cryptography to protect critical infrastructure. We've already funded 62 projects across the country worth $390 million, and 30 member companies are already working with the defense industry today. We're here because Canada's defense market is opening to commercial dual-use technology, and we believe there's real opportunities for Canadian companies. The Canadian government, as you know, released their defense industrial strategy earlier this year. It marks a real shift in how Canada will build, buy, and partner to strengthen national security, sovereignty, and domestic capacity. It comes with major new investment and an explicit embrace of commercial and dual-use innovation. The strategy signals a new path forward for Canada, one that we are unfamiliar with, and it's natural that most innovators don't know where to start. To help Canadian companies navigate a path forward, we created a series of 5 webinars to guide SMEs. In today's session, Getting in the Door, we break down the sequencing of entry, which contract vehicles help you get in the door, where compliance genuinely matters and where it doesn't yet, and how to survive long defense cycles while keeping a commercial business alive. We will be hosting subsequent webinars to continue to provide support and guidance. Based on our learnings from the webinars, the questions that come up, and our collaborations with the defense sector, we are planning a showcase event later this fall. The webinar series is the start of our support and will provide data on what we need to deliver to support Canadian companies. So stay tuned for more details in the early fall. Based on the registrations you filled out, here's a snapshot of who's in the room today. We've had a huge demand, 320 registrations, and I believe that number is even higher than it was this morning. 58% are companies with the technology product or service, and 55% of companies are under 2 million in revenue, and those include pre-revenue. We're also looking at how far along the room is in defense. So we have about 51% exploring or scoping, meaning that they have no buyer contract, a certain percentage in contract or they're actively pitching, 6% already delivering defense work, and 27% who define themselves in a different category. We note that many of the attendees here are falling into that group of seeking to better understand the market and what the next steps are. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Geneviève Bonnen. Jen is an accomplished executive leader with 3 decades of experience architecting strategic vision, solving complex global challenges, and leading large-scale innovations. She is currently the executive senior advisor to Digital on our dual-use technologies program. Her expertise lies in driving technology-enabled innovation and organizational renewal to ensure long-term organizational resilience across diverse portfolios. She brings a reputable network and a powerful synthesis of strategic foresight, innovation mindset, and rigorous governance to every engagement. She is driven by a passion to contribute meaningful value to organizations, dedicated to purpose and excellence. She offers a rare combination of technology, business, financial acumen, and stakeholder management skills designed to navigate the most demanding modern business environments, including defense. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be walking you through our first webinar today. And if we go to the first slide, Artyom. So why are we standing up this series right now? Put simply, we are witnessing the sharpest acceleration in global military spending since the Cold War. This is a generational inflection point. Global defense spending reached a record 2.72 trillion in 2024, representing a massive 9.4% annual spike. By 2030, NATO Europe spending alone is projected to hit 800 billion euros. But here's the critical insight for this audience. The fastest growing slice of this multi-trillion dollar pie isn't traditional heavy hardware. It is innovation, digital infrastructure, and the defense industrial base. Commercial dual-use technology is no longer an afterthought. It is actively being pulled into core defense frameworks. If we go to the next slide. So, how does this macro shift land at home? Canada's defense industrial strategy that was released just a few months ago in February 2026 represents a massive paradigm shift. Backed by 81.8 billion reinvestment signal from budget 2025 and our NATO commitment to reach 22% of GDP by 2035, the government has given a clear mandate. The target is now for 70% of defense acquisition to go to Canadian firms. And given that 92% of Canada's defense sector is comprised of small and medium businesses, this strategy is an explicit pipeline for all SMEs. The doors are wide open for software, AI, quantum, cyber, space, autonomous system. And the window is highly lucrative, but it is crowding fast. So early informed movers will be able to capture this market. Next slide. So to win, you must understand the playing field. Let's establish a shared vocabulary for how Canada's defense team operates. So first of all, you have the buyers. The Department of National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces are the end users. But navigating them is being fundamentally streamlined by the newly established Defense Investment Agencies, DIA, and its build, partner, buy framework. The DIA's mission is to act as a centralized engine to cut red tape and accelerate how technology gets into the hands of the military. Next, we look at the R&D and innovation pathways like DRDC, IDEAS, Borealis, and our CRAP, which fund early to mid-stage tech. And then we have the primes, some of the global titans like CAE, L3Harris, Thales, Boeing. And in future sessions, we will focus intensely on how to partner with them to fulfill industrial and technological benefits or ITB requirements. And finally, we have the enablers, like global innovation clusters, that includes digital. They exist to bridge the gap between technology builders and procurement buyers. Next slide. The non-negotiable. Let's be entirely candid. The front door to this market is a valid contract vehicle and a trusted relationship, not simply a compliance checklist. Compliance is non-negotiable, but it must be sequenced properly. You need to kick off long lead security clearances for personnel and facilities immediately, in parallel with business development. While the new strategy commits to speeding this up, it's historically taken somewhere between 12 to 16 months to get security clearance, or even longer in some cases. You must also evaluate controlled goods registration early. And if you're working with US entities, do your homework on ITAR and technical assistance agreements. Furthermore, ensure you're tracking towards the Canadian Program for Cybersecurity Certification, CPCSC, and security architecture carry a real cost. So some defense work simply cannot be done on a distributed or remote work model, which is important to understand. The next slide. So, because of those timelines, the golden rule of dual use survival is to run parallel tracks. So, keep your civilian track moving fast because short commercial cycles and recurring corporate revenue keep the lights on and prove your product's market viability. And treat your defense track as the long-term strategic play. These contracts are larger and build immense sovereign credibility, but they're slow to close. So do not burn your runway or bet the entire company chasing small sole source defense deals on multi-year timelines. So be realistic. Much of defense spending goes to capital and labor, not pure technology. Maintain your commercial anchor while anchoring and pursuing your defense track if that's what you decide to do. Next slide. So where do we start? Um, so where do you actually point the compass today? Like the Canadian ecosystem is vast, but you can map your entry point based exactly on your maturity level. If you're looking to navigate and find partners, look to ISED, so Innovation, Science, Economic Development's Concierge, or the global innovation clusters like digital. If you're in pure R&D, programs like IDS or Borealis would be built for you. For testing prototypes, leverage the Innovation Solutions Canada's testing streams. For those ready to accelerate, look into specialized streams like the CDL Defense or Community Tech or NATO's Diana Accelerator. And when you're ready to find customers, anchor your calendar around major baseline event like CanSec, which occurred, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Next slide. Yeah, I've already gone through that. Next one. We won't, I don't think we have John
Yes,
with us.
I think John joined.
Oh, we have John. Okay, great. Um, Before we go into the panel, I have now the pleasure to introduce John Nubley, who will be offering some remark before we go into the panel. So John is now a principal at Inox Action. He's a consultant and a board director advising on innovation, competitiveness, defense, and trade. But the reason why we invited John to join us today is because he's one of the most respected former senior federal public servant, having served as a deputy minister for 15 years in various departments. And in his last role, he was the deputy minister of innovation, science, and economic development from 2012 to 2019. John is a close friend. I refer to him as the grandfather of the superclusters, including digital, and he's one of the most innovation leader in our country. Uh, Over to you, John, for some remarks before we go into our panel.
Yeah, so can people hear me because I'm just joining now?
Yeah, all good, John.
All good?
Yeah.
So thanks, Jen, and thanks for the introduction. I do prefer the moniker of father of the clusters as opposed to grandfather, but we won't quibble. What Jen has asked me to do is actually inspire you about where we are now as a country and where the defense procurement and the transformation of defense spending fits into all of this. So I'll talk a bit about the broad picture, what some of the keys to success are, and then focus specifically on what I think the digital cluster can bring to you as businesses in this regard. So it goes without saying, really, that this is a special moment for Canada and for many countries. We're going through the transformation of the economy. The changes, of course, in the United States are considerable. In the case of Canada, really, our traditional closest ally is really not a trusted ally anymore. We're being asked to diversify our trade in ways we have not been successful before. And we're setting priorities in defense spending, the Arctic, critical minerals, to name several. So let's focus on the defense spending aspect. As Jen said, I think it is a very sharp inflection point. We've committed to move our defense spending from 1.5% of GDP to 5% of GDP by 2035. And where there's a similar and associated renewed commitment to build the Arctic. I think what's interesting about the commitment made by the government of Canada is that it's a very broad definition of defense. They've committed to spend 3.5% of the GDP on what they call core defense spending, and 1.5% on infrastructure, both digital and physical, transportation, supply chains, et cetera. And I think there's a lot of dialogue yet to happen on what we are really talking about in this non-core area. But from a longer term perspective, I think it shows a lot of potential for many businesses. I think in the current circumstances where it is a special moment for Canada and we are being asked to build a new Canada, I liken it, I think Jen mentioned the Cold War, but I almost think it's like the end of the war, early 1950s. If any of you remember when C.D. Howe, who was the leading business person that came into government to redesign the infrastructure of the economy, I think that's the kind of inflection point we are at now. And it's in this context, what we really need to recognize is it's no time for sitting back or to really hesitate, if you like. Being cautious at this particular point in time is not what I think is appropriate. I do think you need to be eyes wide open, and I'll come back to that later. But there is a huge opportunity to pivot to dual-use technologies that can reap rewards commercially and in the defense space. And as Jen was saying, I think it is parallel tracks for businesses. You need to spread your risk across the commercial and defense side, with seeing defense as a longer term game. I want to emphasize, though, you could lose out if you don't participate. The story that I tell in this regard is that it relates to my actual parents. One grandfather went to Detroit in 1919, worked on the line, and then brought a truck back to Ottawa and started a national trucking company, which became a very successful company. Another grandparent ran a company in Montreal, which provided buggies for horses. He decided not to change his business, even though he was offered to work with some of the newfangled machines. And of course, you know where his business went. I think what we have today is an opportunity where you have to rise to the occasion of the transformation and the innovation that is going forward. If you try to be cautious, like some of your auditors or maybe even some of your boards want you to be, maybe some of those people advised my grandfather with the carriage company, they are not the right voices. We are asking you to step up, just like the government, to get things done and to move things faster and to achieve new goals that we have not sought for many years. So again, a few success factors. Success depends on all of us working together. It can't be the government or the prime minister or even the opposition leader saying what needs to be done. We all need to work together to get these problems done, and because of the circumstances that we're in. Success depends on being more agile and speedier, including the government, but even us. And as businesses, it's not business as usual, if you like. I do want to emphasize, and I mentioned before, I think it is important that every business keep eyes wide open as we go through this journey to 5% of GDP in defense spending. Clearly, there's lots of uncertainty, unpredictability, and there's evolution all around us. Yesterday, Jen actually said to me, we're on a plane as everything is happening, and we're all going together on this plane or jet as we move forward. So we need to be ready to learn from each other, to observe the evolving governance, the evolving capacity building that will have to happen to know what we need to build. And that applies both in the government, in the defense space, and in business. So let me turn to my last set of points, which is around the digital cluster. Why can they help you? How can they help you? Why are they designed for this kind of special moment? I think it's fair to say, and I was, as a deputy minister, was very involved in the creation of the clusters. They were designed to be conveners and a collaborator for business. And I think what we've seen actually in the super clusters is exactly the kind of activities required for moving forward. They were designed to promote strong partnerships. Private investment has been greater than public, and the resulting new collaborative R&D between large and small firms has been effective, creating supply chains where possible. So those are the kinds of goals that I think the digital cluster are built on and can therefore help you as you move forward. And these sessions that are being designed are exactly in that regard. I just highlight three very specific roles that I think digital can play for you. First is education, as in today's session and in the sessions to follow. The second is triaging, helping businesses connect to D&D to understand their requirements and to bridge, if you like, what you need to do as a business to meet the requirements of D&D and the capabilities they require. And the third is the development of dual use cases. As I said earlier, I think because we're still early in this journey, it's very important that we work together as businesses with digital as a service, if you like, helping to understand what the business cases could be, checking with D&D as you go. So these are the opportunities that I think digital offers you: education, triage, and business cases. I'll just end by saying this is the first session of many, and I encourage you to participate in all that follow. And I am counting on you to step up, to take advantage of the opportunities in this transformation that we're going through to build Canada and to build a new defense system. I'm counting on you to step up. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, John, for those inspiring remarks. And yes, we are, I say always, building the plane as we're flying it. And that's very much what it feels like at the moment. For the next portion of the webinar, we've assembled a great panel of entrepreneurs who have experience in working with defense, all at various stages of their journey in trying to, with what they've created, bring dual use technology to defense. Their bios are on our website, so I'm going to be brief with the introduction, just so that we have more time to hear from them and their experience in working with defense. The first one is, as you see on the slide, is John Moore. So John Moore founded a company called MFIQ. It stands for Mental Fitness IQ in 2022. And prior to that, John had a really successful 35-year career in consulting with firms like IBM and PwC. And he, during that time, focused very heavily in working with government organizations, including defense. And then we have Nandini Jolly, who is the founder, president, and CEO of CryptoMill Cybersecurity Solutions. And that company is one of Canada's most respected cybersecurity firms that supports the government, military, and allied defense client. And we have with us today also Matt Murdoch, who's a professional engineer, program management leader, certified professional coach with about over 20 years experience in the software and space industry. And today is the director of project management office at Earth Daily Analytics. And I am welcome to our panelists. We are going to go through, a series of questions, but at the same time, remind you that we will leave some time for some Q&A. I can't promise that we'll have time to answer all of your questions, but we will commit to following up, based on whatever we see in the room. So I'm going to go to the first question, and I'm going to start with John. And my question is, so when you decided to take your technology into defense, so what did getting in the door actually look like? Where did you start? How did it unfold?
Hey, Jen, before I do, can you hear me all right?
Yes?
Yeah, good. Before I do, I'd like to just pile on some of John's remarks. I think it's important to amplify what he was saying and build on it a little bit. I never in my lifetime did I think that I would have seen something like COVID that we all lived through together. And what's going on now is maybe even more shocking in a way. I think our country is under threat, and we have to stand up together, unite, and tackle this thing in a way that requires Canadian ingenuity, Canadian innovation, Canadian energy, and Team Canada all coming together at once collectively. So I do think that John's call to action is super important. And I think everybody on this call, it's really super interesting that Digital has pulled together this webinar series, but maybe even more importantly, the number of people that are interested in participating, I think is a great bellwether sign to how we're going to jump all over this problem and fix it. We have to. My grandkids are going to be on the forefront of living this, and we will get it done. So, John, thanks for calling that out. I think that's a really important question. So, Jen, for me, for our company, getting in the door originally was revolved around getting a contract vehicle. What I have found in my career in consulting, and certainly with MFIQ, is no contract, no meeting. Literally, especially now with the increased focus on defense spend, there are a lot of organizations are jumping into the defense canoe. And I think the result of that is that many people are knocking on doors, and our colleagues in the defense ecosystem are potentially overwhelmed. So they, to be very practical, are not necessarily legally required, but they're parsing out meetings according to who's got a contract vehicle. So for us, we were fortunate enough to qualify under an ISC program, Innovation Solutions Canada. Jen mentioned this earlier. It's a testing program from industry, from ISED. And that was a critical step for us. Now that we have qualified through a successful test under the sister program called Pathway to Commercialization, we have a valid contract that is, in my mind, really important to be able to even get a meeting. So I'd strongly encourage you, if you haven't looked at the ISC program or ISET, to consider that as a way of having a valid framework to kick off discussions with defense. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you. Nandini, getting in the door. What's been your experience?
So mine's a little bit like John Lennon, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. So I was very much like much of the audience that's out here today. I didn't know much about the military. And then the pandemic hit, as John mentioned, that was a pivotal time for us as a country and as universe. And being a privately funded company, I didn't have VC backing. And so my board said, we need to mothball because we don't know what this is. And that led me to discover, much like you, John, the existence of ISED. So Innovation Canada had put a challenge out for PPEs and for cyber. So I knew that the future of my engineering team was at stake. So I worked nonstop without knowing much about the defense world, but talking with earnestness on my technology. And we were the first to be selected on the cyber front. And as you mentioned, John, for us as well, it was a huge moment of entry point that allowed us then to open up the doors to understand and begin to learn more about the nuances. And I will say to all of those who are earnest about wanting to break into this market, and if I may just pause for a second, I had a quick look at the questions. My only, spiritual response to the folks that struggle with the broken Canada is, we can't move forward if we keep looking backwards. So I would urge all of us together to be more positive in trying to change the world, be the change you want to see, and start that. And the very fact that you guys are hosting this as a starting point is a desire to improve on things. So, and the second thing I'll say is if you really want to get into the market, it took us a while. It's been 4.5 years now for us to fully understand that we are serving a warfighter. Genevieve, your picture at the background shows clearly a soldier coming back home. And if we really want to pivot to that environment, and as John Nubley, you said, it's a call to all of us to step in, step up, and serve the country and serve the warfighter. So our story started with ISET, and there's a lot more to it, but I'll pause and give it back to you, Genevieve.
Thank you, Nandini. Over to you, Matt.
Okay, thanks, Jen. So how we started is through different Canadian government research project opportunities. So specifically with the DRDC, or Defense Research Development Canada. And I've been at Earth Daily and our predecessor for about 10 years now. So we've done a number of projects with DRDC and through a few different programs, such as the Canadian Safety and Security Program and the IDEAS programs. And I think those are good ways to sort of get in the door to help prove out your technology. They're relatively quick procurement cycles, I think, for the government to kind of get in the door, get to meet with people. And what we've been doing over the last number of years is just using these projects to help prove out our technology, build credibility with the different stakeholders in anticipation of what our sort of bigger mission at Earth Daily is we're building a constellation of 10 satellites. So you can see in my background that'll be able to image the entire landmass every day at 5 meters. So basically we can measure change on a daily basis for the whole world. And so this is our product that we really think will have a lot of value to the government, but being able to show prove out our technology early on through these different programs has been a big help. And now we're in the point where we're being able to look at bigger opportunities, talking to more people, and we have that credibility. So that's kind of, I would recommend starting with some of these existing programs, and they're relatively, straightforward to get in the door. Back to you, Jen.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm going to stay with you, Matt. Now, with my second question is, what were some of the biggest obstacle, the things that you didn't envisage, and what was the impact on your organization, and how did you surmount those obstacles?
Yeah, no, thanks. And I've seen a few comments related to this. I think security clearances, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, is definitely a little bit of a challenge. We started that process back when Earth Daily founded, probably about 2021, and I'm actually the company security officer, so I'm quite familiar with how that works. It is the 18 months, I think, is the long sort of time frame. If you're going for a reliability clearance and you and some of your staff have previously gone through this process, it can be done, I think, a fair bit quicker than that. But some of the challenges is really just making sure you have a sponsor or a project you're bidding on that has this requirements. You can't just go out there and just get your security clearance in anticipation. So you need to be bidding on an RFP that has a requirement or win a project that has a requirement. So I think it's just something to consider. There definitely is some lead time. And you also need to think about even some of the staff that's getting clearance. There's different, requirements and background checks they do, and certain people can take up to the 18 months. So that I think that is really the challenge, but some people will be cleared very quickly. So it just needs to be part of your planning process. And one thing that we discovered recently is we're trying to upgrade our organization to a higher clearance. And one way you can potentially get in the door is if you are working with some of the big primes or partner in something, they can sponsor you too. So that's another avenue to kind of get in the door. So security clearance is a challenge. I think the government's trying to make it faster. I don't know how much it's going to speed up, but it's just something to be aware of.
Yep. Security clearances. I mean, it's a pain that we all feel, but so does our client. And there are, I am told, numerous different sort of projects underway to streamline that, hopefully. But, you can't do work without it. So, sort of go in eyes wide open and get on it as soon as you can. Now, Nandini, you have your journey has not been without obstacles. Tell us about what you've experienced over the last few years.
Yeah, so just closing the loop on security clearance, certainly that is an issue, but I will say that, maybe I'm just good news, good news all the time hoping. But there is an expedited effort to get those clearances in motion faster and shorter span of time. And as you said, Matt, if you have an existing contract, any kind, testing or otherwise, that allows you to apply for the security clearance, and the DIA, the Defense Industry Agency, is looking and expediting the steps as we speak. Having said that, yes, there is a backlog for sure. But I will also say in all earnestness to the audience here, depending on where you are, while that is an important part, as is a lot of the compliancy, don't lose a perspective of the fact that you want to try, test, and prove your technology in parallel. So what I mean by that is you could approach and get the compliancy and clearances in place, or you could understand and look for the right use case that applies to your tech. So for example, at CryptoMill, we are focused on data protection, and that can be radar data, satellite data, user data, Microsoft files. Data is data, and one of or all of our patents are unique in that the data is wrapped around, the protection is wrapped around the data, and so it protects data, but also facilitates secure sharing and collaboration within Canadian military and international allies. Why I'm sharing that is that one of the things we continue to hammer down with our multiple contracts, which are in testing phases in the land, air, sea, and satellite domain, are in understanding the exactness of the application and the value to protecting and facilitating that information share. You cannot discount the importance of that, because although it's a bit like weightlifting, you lift a lot of weights. In the beginning, it feels really tedious, but at the end of the day, you've toned up your body overall. And that's why applying the use cases and applying the tech to your use cases and identifying the value to defense then allows you to have your application or technology speak to itself. And then in some ways, it actually expedites the process, because once you've proven the point of why this is so critical in support of a warfighter in a connected cloud environment, in a disconnected tactical environment, you then literally have the parting of the Red Sea, in that a lot more of the leadership steps in, having seen the value for it, to expedite the steps that need to be done. Because remember, it isn't a turnkey, I'm going into defense today and I'm going to deploy it in the field. No way. There's a lot of different aspects to deployment in the actual field of any tech. And the journey is sequential: testing, validation, certification, providing those clearances to get you the use cases at a high, top secret level, or applications to that level. But it is a journey. So I would say that for me, the challenge has been two-pronged. One, I was a little bit of a misstep, because John mentioned, procurement pathway. Because we were selected in the very beginning, there was no pathway to commercialization. So all of you are already in an advantage, because all new challenges are coming up with some kind of a pathway to commercialization. So after doing 3 contracts with the Navy and 1 with StatsCan and 1 with DND during the pandemic, I was back to square one. So that was my one challenge. But the only way to do great work is to love what you do, and we love what we do, so we continued on. The other challenge is it is a highly complex industry in that there's a lot of environmental things that are unique to D&D, to the defense world. So it's not a cookie cutter, turnkey kind of an environment. And for us, from a data protection, encryption, cryptography, it is important to see that we understand the environment. So, I would say try to understand the environment, the software, the hardware that the military uses in the domain that you're adding value, because that takes time too. And there's always a shortage of people to sit down and hold your hand. So you have to be intuitive, and you're already at an advantage because you've got the likes of Claude and AI and all of that. So you can at least get that going. So it is a complex environment. I will say it continues to be a challenge, but at the same time, we've created such a trusted integrity footprint within the D&D that we've got a lot of folks in uniform that are supporting us. So mindful of that. And then, of course, the compliancy piece. There's the security clearance being one, there's controlled goods. There's also, the Securities Establishment, CSE, that is provides what is called ATO, Authority to Operate. So from the point that you are doing testing and then you go through validation and then you actually look at deployment, you need to get a whole series of check marks that include the ATO approval, depending on where you are running your software or hardware. That is the final authority. In some cases, it is the Defense D&D DSG group. In some cases, it is the Cyber Command. In our cases, it is this Canadian Cyber Command. And in many cases, it is the CSE. So you need to be mindful of, I would encourage all of you to think of what your end goal is and bring it forward and keep those notions of check marks that need to be applied so that you can actually have a path that over the course of multi-years, and it will be a multi-year. It's not that you go in, get a deal, and then you deploy it. There's some steps to be done. But a couple of years, 18 months to 20 months, 24 months, you could potentially, if you get all the ducks aligned, get to that deployment stage, depending on what you do. So those are the challenges. Over.
Thank you. I think I would like to emphasize, how it is in fact very complex, and understanding sort of like even the difference in culture between the Canadian Armed Forces side of the house versus like the Department of National Defense, and the long list of acronyms that you need to sort of get yourself familiarized to understand, how the organization work. Definitely presents, a little bit of a challenge, and something there's a pretty steep learning curve when you decide to kind of go into defense. John, over to you. I mean, I understand your company was awarded recently like a fairly significant standing offer agreement, and that now gives you the ticket to go and perhaps to work in defense and deploy your technology there. What do you foresee some of the obstacles going forward, what they might be?
Jenna, maybe just building on what the other folks have said, but in a slightly different way. I think lack of perseverance can be a real obstacle. I've got most of our team has got years experience dealing with the federal government as a client and national defense as well, but some of our team members lack that experience, and we're actually questioning why we were continuing to invest in the market given the amount of time that it was taking. So as the others have said, it is a process, and when you're taking 18 months to get a signed statement of work after many meetings with officials to nail down a requirement, you might ask yourself, why am I doing this yourself? But I do feel that, the pace of the process is going to improve with the current focus on it. And I think as that happens, there is still going to be a whole myriad of things that are going to have to be on the checklist, whether it's security clearance, whether it's authority to operate, whether it's signing a particular deal. We haven't talked about who holds the budget. We haven't talked about necessarily the complexity of the different stakeholder communities in defense that have to be aligned in not necessarily to do a pilot, but to do a full deployment. There are many, many different elements or components of national defense and CAF that'll have to be aligned. So this is all hard work. It takes time. That's the bad news. The great news in all this is it is a massive opportunity, especially with the funding that the department is getting recently, and I think is going to continue for the foreseeable future. As a former deputy who's a friend of mine said to me, you just have to buy yourself a pillow and every so often scream into it out of frustration, get over it, focus on the size of the prize at the end. It will be worth it. And just keep chugging along and work at it. Tell your colleagues that every step of the way, build confidence that this is going to be a great thing. And not only if you get into the Canadian Armed Forces environment, but that reference that you get and the ability to take that type of qualification, that type of validation of your solution to other armed forces around the world is massive. And it's also a highly referenceable situation for other commercial customers in not only in Canada, but other places. If you say that you are live at an enterprise scale in the Department of National Defense, that's worth gold for your business. So back to you, Jen.
Thank you. I'm just monitoring some of the questions that are in the chat. I see some of them have been answered. I do have more questions for the panelists, but I don't want for us to run out of time. We will commit to answering the questions that are here if we are not able to go through every one of them, live today. And now I'm going to go back to you, Matt. I'm going to combine my question 3 and 4 with looking at the trade-off that you had to make in terms of like your civilian application when you decided to commit, and what was sort of the turning point for you in deciding to go after defense, and how did you organize yourself? Like what kind of investments did you have to make? What was the sort of the breakthrough?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So traditionally, I guess our business was built and focused on things like agriculture, mining, wildfires, forestry, and insurance. And defense has always been a bit more opportunistic. We've done R&D projects with there. So we were kind of always set up to be able to do a little bit of it. And now as we're seeing more and more opportunities, there is definitely a bit of a pivot. But the way our technology works luckily it can be used for all those things. And sure, there's some additional analytics and stuff we have to build on, but at least our data is something that's sort of universal. So in some ways, it's not that hard of a pivot to sort of for our business to support defense, but we are starting to ramp up in that space. And I guess how we organize it, we're kind of taking small steps. I think we're taking bigger steps now because we're seeing more and more opportunities. But I think really it's those small steps gradually build the relationship. Even the security clearance, I'm going to mention that again. I know that's a pain point, but you gradually get certain people cleared. So you're kind of building up that capability over time. I know people want to do it now, but you can start small, and I think you can still get in the door. And yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge, but I think there's a lot of optimism and a lot of opportunity. So I would encourage people to, sometimes it's challenging to working with different government departments because they might not move as fast as you hope, but I think it's worth it. We've done a lot of it. You just need to be patient in some cases. And I liked John's analogy of the pillow. I'm sure I've been in that case a few times, but just keep pushing forward.
Great, thank you. John, investments, I mean, it's a long journey and you're just kind of getting started. So, and trade-offs, like, why go after defense?
That's a great question, and one that my colleagues certainly challenge us on all the time. So I think the reality of small business is you have to keep your cash flow coming in. You got to balance out the available financing that you've got, expectations of your investors to drive shorter term pipeline and close opportunities. So I think I won't pretend to say that there's one answer that is right for everybody. I think you have to answer the question in the context of all of those things that I just mentioned. So for us, we've taken a double track approach. We believe that driving longer term opportunity through defense is going to be really good for our business. But we're not betting the farm on it by any stretch. We've got a portfolio of other things that'll close shorter term as a way of keeping the lights on and managing expectations of all our stakeholders. But we do feel it's really important to have a play in the longer term, especially. And we frankly, had developed this strategy 3 years ago when we bid for the ISC program, thinking that public sector public sector as a whole in Canada is more than half of the economy. And it is in most countries other than our neighbors to the south. But it's a huge part of the economy, and you're in the game in a serious way if you're in the game with defense. So I think, as I said, it's got to be a contextualized decision that everybody on the call is going to have to make on your own, given your resource constraints. But I do think that if you get in, it'll be the gift that keeps on giving. It's a long-term play and probably worth it if you can balance out the cash flow. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you, Don. Nandini, over to you on trade-offs and investments.
So for us, it's a little bit, we want to collectively, having got into the system, we see that we can create an impact in the warfighter's life, from securing the comm systems to protecting the information that commanders use in order to make decisions with speed of lightning and relevance. So we call it speed of life because we recognize that we actually have the potential to bring tremendous value in both connected and tactical edge environments. And that journey over the last 3-4 years has brought us to this conclusion. As a result, we wake up every morning and really weirdly thank God that we are doing what we're doing. And so, yes, it's a very tough journey for all of us entrepreneurs on this call. You have to be prudent, be focused. If you have to go to Ottawa, take the train, don't fly. You don't have to, like the easier way to do that, drive if you can. Those are the things that we did during the early days. We still do it, quite honestly. And we made the journey itself is fun from that perspective. And then the other thing is, we do have dual use technology, but I would say that having seen that we have established a strong foothold within the defense arena in the last 4 years or so, a lot of our focus is on defense, because if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well, because any margin of error in what we do and what we're designing in parallel to the feedback from our testing can have an impact on the warfighter. And so I know I sound like a crack record, but for us, this is the pivotal point. I saw quickly that, in the chats, there's a lot of comments. If you have an opportunity to go into Ukraine, grab it, run with it, because Ukraine is a classic country, unlike us, that is under attack. And so their decision-making process is quite unique. I was with some Ukrainian soldiers, and it's uncanny how openly they talk about the kind of software Russia is using to attack them, and can you protect our data from that crypto mill? And so if you have an opportunity to work with other nations in parallel, don't hesitate. Security clearances are really for top secret environments and use cases. If it's not applicable to you, you don't have to be bogged down by it. And, CMMC, someone pointed out, is really important. I'm looking at it as we speak from two perspectives. We solve the CMMC data domain requirements with our software. And the other is we also want to make sure that any aspect of it that applies is mandatory and goes through. So, it's a really fluid thing. There's no cookie cutter approach to do it. My only advice to all of you is what I've followed with my team, and that's be honest, be integrity driven. There's no shortcut to hard work, and stay positive. And like I said, if you focus and believe that you can do it, you can do it. So bring in the I am possible and the impossible. And sometimes, and I practice this quite regularly, I turn off the noise. There will be a lot of people that say that this is tough, that is tough, this is wrong, this is bad. Yes, it's all true. It is all correct. But if you're really passionate and you really believe you have something important to contribute, then turn off the noise, focus on your pathway, and you'll make it. And so, it's good to have these discussions, but also each of us pave our own pathway. So be persistent, be relentless, be strong, and do some form of exercise to release the stress over.
Great word of advice, Nandini. With a few minutes to go, I want to quickly go through some of the questions that I see in the Q&A. One of them being, if you have a proven health-related innovation that would benefit defense, dual use, does the company still have to go through security clearance? And yeah, it's non-negotiable. There's just no way around it. So that is required. There's another interesting question. It's pretty open-ended, but it's how does Canada compare to other countries? I'll answer it partly, and then maybe I'll go to John Nubley after. But I think many countries, and especially our allied nations, are doubling down on their investment in defense. I mean, without going through sort of like comparables, I mean, it's pretty clear that all countries are realizing that security is one of the fairly, with everything that's happening geopolitically, kind of like an issue, and investments are required. And again, everybody is doubling down. I think the one thing that's, from my vantage point, I think is kind of changing for Canada is some of our allied nations have historically, perhaps being a little bit less reliant on other countries. And, if you take a company like a country like France, for example, historically, they have directed all of their spend with French-based company, like the majority of it, and made it really simple so that they, again, lessen their reliance on other countries. And I think what is changing for Canada right now is the commitment to sort of, again, maybe lessen our own reliance on other countries, and sort of build in Canada and also export. So, I mean, John said earlier, long-term gain, the gift that keeps on giving, even though your entry point might be, Canada, working with defense in Canada, the opportunity to sort of work with other allied nations, is a really great opportunity. And, especially with European countries right now, where we're really strengthening those relationships and the collaboration and the exports to those countries. I mean, that, sort of that's part of your long-term game. But John, any word on, sort of you go like, how do Canada compare, maybe from an innovation standpoint? And John Nubley, yeah, and you're on mute.
So, yeah, two or three comments. On the technology side, I think what we're seeing globally is that NATO and the United States, in support of these technology issues, are very concerned that the Chinese and the Russians are catching up, if you like, in terms of technological capability. I mean, a specific example would be in the AI sector, given the amount of data that the Chinese have available to them to use for their development of their applications. So I think what we're seeing is a real coalition, if you like, among the developed countries, the more democratic ones, to promote technology development in the defense area that is dual use. And so Canada is participating in that. I think, bear with me, Jen, but I'd say that Canada's image of defense in the past has been almost based on peacekeeping. So in comparison to other countries, we have relied on the United States in some respects to help build our North America defense system, and our spending has been very low. We have said it's at 1.5%, but I think the reality has been closer to 1% of GDP. So Canada has a lot to do to catch up and to become, as Prime Minister Carney talks, a leading middle power in the defense space. And that's where you've seen, as Jen was just talking about, how we've reached out to European countries, and I would even say some South Asian countries as well in this context. So that's my picture from my perspective.
Hey, Jen, can
Thank
I
you.
can I
Well,
hop in on that?
we are at time, so I'm going to have to pass it back to RTM, and maybe you can let us know, RTM, if we can go a little bit over. But over to you, RTM.
Yes, thank you, Jen. Yeah, so unfortunately we are over the time, so we would like to respect the time of all the people here. So yeah, so probably the last word to close this. That brings us to the end of today's sessions. So on behalf of Digital, thank you all for joining us for Getting in the Door, our first webinar in our Defense Market Access series. A real thank you to our panel, John, Nandini, Matt, for sharing such practical insights, and to Genevieve, to you, for guiding the conversation. And our special thanks to John Nably for setting the stage with us today. So a few quick notes before we close. In the next couple of days, everyone who registered will receive a follow-up email from us with the recording of today's session and the slides we shared, along with the link to the series so you can follow us along. We weren't able to get every question today, so if there is something we did not reach or anything you would like to talk through, I'm your point of contact from digital side. My email will be on the deck as well. Reach out and we will be glad to help. And this is just the beginning. As we mentioned before, the next webinar is coming in July. We will announce the date soon, so keep an eye on your inbox. We would love to see you there. Thanks again, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.